All right, now it's time to put these together. All the ones are cut, folded, glued, and ready to go. So we're going to go back to the first one that we did with the 3 columns. That was the pink piece of paper. And we're going to start with the left column first, and you'll see which one that actually is when it gets started here. So as you go down these, this is the information that you want to make sure that you have. So we're going to first define what a ratio is. Ratio is a comparison of 2 or more numbers. We can set up ratios, in this case, of circles to stars, so you can ratio anything pretty much, but you have to keep it in relationship to what goes first, what goes second. So in this case, our stars go first, circles go second, so we have 2 stars to 3 circles. The last one is, there are 3 ways that you can write a ratio. You can use a semicolon, you can put it as a fraction, or you can use the word to. And again, the first word in your sentence for that is going to go first. Your second sentence or second word in your sentence is going to go second. Moving on to the center column for what we have. Now we talk a little bit about a rate. The rate is the ratio when you compare 2 units. So think of miles per hour, meters per second. Now you have a rate, so we do have specific units for this. So in regards to a car that travels 100 miles in 2 hours, our rate would be 100 miles over 2 hours. A unit rate is going to tell us the lowest. So now we're going to be in terms of the denominator being 1. So if we go back to our 100 miles over 2 hours, that's a rate. The unit rate would be 50 miles per hour. So in 50 miles, we would cover in 1 hour, we would cover 50 miles. In 2 hours, we would cover 100 miles. 3 hours, we would cover 150 miles. So it is a unit rate, and a ratio. The right column for this one, now we're dealing with proportions. A proportion is simply an equation where you set 2 ratios equal to each other. And there's a few things that we're going to be expected to do on this one. There's going to be a lot that you're going to work with these, so this is a good one to make sure that you understand what we're doing for this. So the example is, one of the things is, do we have an equivalent fraction? So one of the ways that you can do this is you can cross multiply here and go 40 times 25. The question is, does that equal 100 times your 10? The other way that you can look at it, and if they do equal, that's what you get. Another way to look at it is, you can say, well, what times 10 gives you 40? If I take 10 times 4, that gives me 40. If I can multiply 25 times 4, will that give me 100? So the answer is yes. So these are equivalent fractions to each other, or excuse me, equivalent ratios. That's one of the examples and ways that you're going to be asked to do this. The last one is basically telling you what you want to do. So you do and want to cross what we call cross product. So we're kind of getting into a little bit of a fractional sense of this when we start looking at that. Again, if we're still dealing with fractions, please let me know, because you need to get it taken care of. So our next one is going to be the one we cut into a square and we folded the corners into the middle. The first one is ratio. So again, we've got some information here that we want to talk about as we go through it. So simply, a ratio is a comparison of 2 quantities. using division, because that's what that line tells us. So in this case, we have circles to triangles. As we look at it, it depends on how you are asked to write it. Circles to triangles would be the way to do it. So the circle numbers would go first, triangle number would go second. And again, there's the three different ways that you can write a ratio. We rotate it. We're going to be on equivalent ratios. Equivalent ratios are ratios that name the same comparison. So they're equal to each other. So if we look at what we have here, we have circles again and triangles. So we're looking at the number of triangles over the number of circles. We have 4 to 6. In regards to triangles to circles, notice that they're backwards. But I can reduce that down, and 2/3 is an equivalent ratio of that. Moving on and rotating again to rate. Rate is again something with dealing with units of measure. So miles, hours, meters, seconds. So we're looking at something in regards to maybe a price. So when you go shopping and do comparison pricing, you may look at a couple different things in regards to, am I getting the best deal for what I'm doing in shopping? When you do this with money to a quantity, the money goes on top, quantity goes on the bottom. So our rate that we would write is, we are buying $2.50 for 10 ounces. Our last one on this one is what we call the unit rate. Again, our unit rate is where we get the second term in the denominator position, if you want to look at it as a fraction, to a 1. So we're basically dividing bottom into top for what we're dealing with. So if we go back to our example that we had with our $2.50 per 10 ounces, we can reduce that down and say now we want to get our ounces down to 1 ounce. How much am I paying for 1 ounce? Well, I'm paying 25 cents per 1 ounce for my rate. In this case, a unit rate. So a unit rate, the biggest thing is your denominator, the number in the bottom, is going to be 1. Our third foldable was the orange sheet of paper that you folded into French doors. You want to have it closed at this point because you're on the outside of the doors. On the outside of the doors, if you would put this across the top, solving a proportion through cross multiplication. On the left-hand door, if you would put A over B. As the doors are closed, across the door, the dashed lines represent where the doors close at. Put an equal sign. And then the last one on the right-hand side is C over D. Now, when we open this up, we're going to use the inside part to show what is meant by cross multiplication. So the next thing I'm going to show you is on the inside of your foldable, and this is showing you where your cross multiplication takes place at. So once you cross multiply, what you have is you have the arrows that you see on here, and the arrows are right here, and they represent I'm cross multiplying this way. So I'm multiplying my C times my B. If you go back to the other side, again, you're cross multiplying here. You're having A times your D. Again, the arrows are showing you the direction that you're cross multiplying. If I go back to the front of this and kind of show you that on this is how your letters become together through multiplication. So I'm multiplying in this direction, A times my D, and it doesn't matter which side you put on the equal sign. I'm also going to cross multiply this way, so I'm multiplying my C times my B. So when I'm all said and done, back to the inside part of it, this is the result of what you have for solving a proportion through cross multiplication. Our last one that we're doing is the colorful one that you have 3 different colors of paper with yes, no We're going to start with the front here, and this should be the top part of your proportion foldable. We're going to put this on the outside of this, and these are the questions that you kind of ask the question to the problem. So can you multiply or divide to find the equivalent ratio? So what are you multiplying times 8 to get you 16? What are you multiplying, or in this case dividing by 25 to give you 5? So I've got here, I'm going to multiply by 2. Here I'm going to be dividing by 5. In order for that to happen, I have to do the exact same thing up at the top. So I have to multiply this by 2, and I have to divide here by 5 to get my answer for x for both of the problems. And we'll get into that as we go. So I think I kind of jumped the gun on you. We'll see what happens. So the second part of this question is, need to create an equation through cross multiplication. So the top part doesn't work, the bottom part does, and you got to go ahead and cross multiply. So that's the first one. Now go into your second one. And this is your first yes. So again, I kind of jumped the gun on the front side, so this, you want to put this on in the middle. So again, if you can do this, take care of it. It's a shortcut. 5 times 2 gives you 10 because you multiply the 8 times 2 to give you 16. 5 times 2 is 10, that's your answer. 25 divided by 5, 5 divided into 10 gives you the x of 2. If you can do it the other direction, here's your steps for this one. This is going back to equations. This is why we hit equations as hard as we did, because that is what you're going to end up having to do sometimes. This is going to be one of the steps that you're going to have to make sure that you understand. So there are your steps 1, 2, and 3 for walking you through that process. On the back side, you have the no's. So let's finish those off here. So again, this is kind of a question and answer. If it's yes, do it. If it's no, follow the directions on the no part. Go to the next step and use the cross multiplication. If it's no here, you must be done, since it's done by greatest common factor, or it's a one-step equation. So this one is kind of simple in the sense of what you're doing, but it walks you through the problems that you're going to work with in this section and the following section.